What up? Wolf Druid has greatly outperformed our expectations as a build. We hoped it could do good damage, that was about it. It's doing so much more damage than any other build we've made yet in this league. It's fast, it's tanky, and it's really fun to play. We could easily just stick with Wolf Druid for the rest of the league. It's rapidly moving into play this build now before it gets nerfed next patch territory. So we're going to talk about the build in the endgame now that we've blasted everything worth blasting. Before we jump into it, help us out with that YouTube busy work, like, subscribe, and hype this video if you're on mobile. These all tell YouTube to show our content to more people, which helps us keep doing this. Okay, let's talk about why the build is so strong. Wolf Druid gets over 200% worth of damage as extra bonuses between buffs and the passive tree. Every point of damage that you have on your weapons and your rings is more than tripled. This is on top of all the normal damage scaling that you get out of skills and support gems and the passive tree. As you can imagine, it gives you an insane amount of damage scaling. Wolf Druid's clear is preposterous. Lunar Blessing rains down pillars of cold attack damage every time you hit an enemy with any of your skills, including Lunar Assault, which gives you good clear on its own, but it gets even better than that. All the enemies that you hit with Lunar Assault, or the Lunar Blessing pillars, trigger Herald of Ice explosions when they die, which kills everything. It's just so incredible that GGG has allowed Wolves to maintain 100% uptime on Lunar Blessing. This thing is a clearing machine. But that's not all. Wolf form has incredible boss damage. The combo is pretty easy to do, and because it's built around freezing enemies, it's super safe to set up. You mark a boss with Pounce, you freeze them with Lunar Assault, you shred them to load up a bunch of ice crystals, then you detonate them by hitting Cross Slash. It's simple and satisfying. This build is obliterating the hardest content in the game, max rank, powerful map bosses. It also makes easy work of pinnacle bosses. It's even cranking juiced up temple bosses pretty easily as well. Wolf Druid is also shockingly tanky. We heard so many negative things about armor and ES as a defensive archetype from Reddit and the YouTube comments section, but nope. It's a really strong defensive setup if you invest into it. And that's the key here. You do need a decent amount of armor for it to work, but the combination of armor and energy shield is really working. This character is still lower budget than the Poison Pathfinder. It does more damage, has better clear, better bossing, and it's tankier. It's also faster because Werewolf form gets that 30% move speed bonus that people were complaining about at the start of the league for some reason. It didn't get armor like Bear. Who cares now? So all of this is to say it's kind of a perfect build. So we do have a Mobalytics guide for this build. Previously it was just for leveling, now it is for both leveling and the end game. We did put a little bit of extra work into this one because this is not the most simple build in the universe to play, but once you get the hang of it, it's incredibly rewarding. It's definitely worth the time and effort required to play this build. It is so insanely strong, and we really have a lot of info here, covering how to play it and how to make it work and kind of fix any of the problems that might arise. We have also made some changes to the passive tree and a little bit to skills as well. So let's talk about the skills now, and we'll start with just some of the basics here. Lunar Assault and Pounce are still kind of your main bread and butter, right? You're running around maps, you're pouncing on enemies, and if that doesn't kill them, you're hitting them with Lunar Assault, and that's going to definitely kill them, and you're just kind of doing that back and forth. You're also taking advantage of Lunar Assault and Bater's Vengeance having this really nice synergy where we are playing a build that generates rage passively because of Eternal Rage, which we're spending 100 Spirit on, and it's absolutely worth it. We have maxed rage all the time, so 69 rage right now, very nice. And Bater's Vengeance turns that into 69% damage as extra cold, and the base duration on this is 20 seconds, but it does actually scale with skill effect duration, so it's about 30 seconds. So you only have to freeze one enemy every 30 seconds. With your main damaging skill, you're going to be doing that way more often than that. And so you're pouncing around, Lunar Assaulting. That's pretty much it for clearing packs throughout maps. Blazing Criticals also giving you damage as extra fire. Lots of other stuff coming in here. Ancestral Call rank 2 on Lunar Assault does also give you that Ancestral boost. You basically just get free extra swipes whenever you cast Lunar Assault every 3 seconds. So you're getting it on probably about half or maybe closer to 75% of your Lunar Assaults while you're zipping around mapping. You also get regen out of casting Pounce because of Holy Descent. This is absolutely worth using because this is a blood magic build, and that is kind of one of the things that people have had a little bit of confusion or difficulty or whatever with. It's just the fact that if you are just sitting there spamming one skill over and over again, you are eating your life pool. It kind of sucks. So Holy Descent helps a lot with giving you that consecrated ground, 5% of life per second regenerated. That's pretty good. That's kind of all the regen that we really get in the build. for the most part, and it's more than enough while mapping. We do also get some life on kill, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail later on. But we also use Mark of Siphoning rank 2, and that lets us leech life and mana from all of the damage that we do to enemies that we mark. We do use Pounce to mark enemies with Freezing Mark, and this is really why the build is able to work so incredibly well on bosses, because it works on all damage types, not just physical. So even though we do a ton of cold and lightning and fire damage, in addition to some physical, yeah, we just leech 5% of all of the damage we do, period. We do still have some life leech on a ring. I don't really know how much good it's actually doing when combined with the Mark of Siphoning. Like, we might actually be able to get away without running it, but, you know, this is a handcrafted ring that came out pretty nice, so I'm not going to throw it away, right? Now, as for the other skills, we're still pretty much using them all in the same way. Lunar Blessing is really, really noticeable how much, like, it helps with clear and with single target damage. And so we are just maintaining that all the time, and it's super easy to do, right? You just hit the button every 25 seconds or so. It'll burn all of your current rage to make it last longer. It lasts for like 25 seconds at a time. If you're not using a Magi Talisman, we are using a Spiny Talisman. Again, I'll get to that in a little bit more detail once we start talking about gear, but yeah, you know, the cooldown is like 13 seconds. You can see it's very easy to maintain a full effect Lunar Blessing. Even if you're not hitting anything, it's very easy to maintain. Of course, if you are hitting stuff and actually generating rage directly, then it becomes much easier to do. And there's just a huge damage increase and a huge source of clear. The one kind of funky skill in all of this, like, Cross Slash is very simple. Ultimately, you, like, when you froze in a boss, you know, you pounce on him to mark him, freeze him with Lunar Assault, and then you start hitting him with Shred. It'll spawn a bunch of ice crystals, and then when you hit an enemy with Cross Slash, if you hit him with both slashes, it will summon all of the ice crystals to them and make them explode instantly. So this can work really well in bossing, but it's actually pretty simple to use. Like, it really just boils down to, like, you just hit an enemy with both of the slashes, and then it makes all the fragments blow up on them. It's not any more complicated than that. Arctic Howl is the one skill that's a little bit more funky to use, and it's something that we kind of waffled back and forth on using versus not using. It just empowers your next several of attacks if you hit an enemy that's frozen, and so that's basically how we're using it, right? You get a boss, you have a bunch of ice fragments already spawned, you're ready to blast them with a Cross Slash, hit that Howl, and then hit him with a Cross Slash, you get a little bit of extra damage. Maybe you should use it at the start, like you freeze a boss and then Howl. That was how we were using it initially, and getting the empowerment on the fragments and then slashing them onto the boss. Honestly, we've kind of gone back and forth, waffled back and forth on whether this should be in there at the beginning or the end of the combo, but the definite thing is that you want to have it on before you hit the Cross Slash so that it at least buffs that damage and just, you know, whatever, gives you a bit of extra damage. It's the one skill in all of this that's a little bit more questionable. And then Herald of Ice is doing a lot for us in terms of clear. Obviously, it's doing great clear magnified armament and elemental armament, make it into a bona fide clearing machine. And then we have this combo, this kind of classic combo of armor break to make it break armor, based on all the physical damage that we do with it, because we do get some damage that's extra physical, which is why this is able to work. And then armor explosion, triggering explosions when enemy armor break occurs, and Uruk Smelting, making it break more armor, so that it's way easier to get those armor breaks and get the armor explosions. Now, one thing that was really important for us to kind of sort out was the life regen of how to, like, keep this build feeling good in maps, and so we've done that through a combination of using Cannibalism as one of our supports. We did play around with getting more spirit, like getting like an extra spirit body armor instead of just like 57, getting one of those hybrid armors that has like spirit as an implicit, and also throwing in Vitality for like 1% life regen per second, and it was okay. Ultimately, we're just throwing in Precision because it chews up the last 10 spirit. It's not really mandatory, but, you know, depending on accuracy levels, maybe it's exactly what we need to actually hit all the time. Ultimately, this is working out pretty well. We are also using, on one of these jewels, one of our jewels here is a Sapphire with 2% life on kill, so we're getting 4% life on kill. So that is a big part of why this build feels so incredibly safe in mapping, is we're getting 2% out of Cannibalism and 2% out of a jewel. If you're only getting 2% out of Cannibalism and nothing out of the jewel, it's probably going to feel quite a bit less safe in the course of just zipping through maps. It's going to feel the same on bosses, though. Like, you know, ultimately all of that boss sustain is really just coming from the mark and the siphoning mark. Another thing that we've kind of mixed up in the tree here from where we were before is we're not playing around with any of the Arcane Surge and Touch the Arcane to make Sanguimatic rituals. better. This did actually work with the life regen that you get out of the Holy Descent, so it was giving you a lot of life regen if you had Arcane Surge going, but the uptime just wasn't great. Instead, we've just gone with old, reliable, dependable ward to really shave the energy shield recharge startup down to under 2 seconds, and we're getting like 400 plus a second, so it's recharging in 5 seconds or less from 0. That's pretty good. Calibration's one that kind of sneaks in down here, but like 30% extra energy shield's also pretty good. Like the combo of 2k life and 2500 energy shield, 2400 is not blowing anybody's mind with the max hit, but it's feeling very, very tanky in conjunction with everything else we have going on. The 14,000 armor and like close to that same amount of armor applying to elemental damage, it's working really well. Then also down here we have stuck with the Resolute technique. We tried playing around with some other things, but ultimately the from nothing in the radius of Resolute technique is just working insanely well. It's also helping with scaling up some of that life. Behemoth is working nice. You know, you get AoE, you get max life, pretty cool. Unbending helps with, like, you basically just never get stunned on this build because of unbending, and then more max life is not a bad thing. But then, like, Honorless along with Projectile Bulwark and Vengeful Fury, you really, really get the benefits of having like a bunch of extra armor and defending with extra armor against projectiles, which are kind of the more dangerous thing. You're pretty much freezing everything that's close to you all the time. And yeah, that really does a lot to make you tankier and also give you a crazy amount of damage. 50% increased melee damage against immobilized enemies, frozen enemies is insane. Then one thing that we've swapped in here very recently, like just earlier today, was Unimpeded, 24% reduced slowing potency of buffs on you, debuffs rather, along with Iron Slippers up here. Just makes it so that like Chilled Ground and Temp Chains feel way less awful. Like it cuts them from like 27%, I think, down into the like mid-teens. And then if it's a curse and you have the Consecrated Ground on you, that gets cut in half as well. So it goes from like 27% down to 9%. For the periods where you're like pouncing around. So it really helps a lot, and as much as it's like not a defensive increase and not a damage increase, it's such a utility increase to be like slowed less by Chilled Ground, because it's just so commonly in all of the 6 mod maps that we're doing that it's really, really irritating and good to have that just off the table. Then a lot of these other things are still things that we've been playing around with, you know, pretty much the whole time. A lot of these bonuses that just seem very basic, Bastion of the Forest and Natural Essence, are just really, really good defensive bonuses. All of the hybrid armor and energy shield stuff works really well with even just like a decent amount of gearing, and then kind of gaming for things like Runic Helm, where, yeah, you're going to wear a pure armor helm because this gives you energy shield for all the armor on your helm. Iron Slippers are going to wear pure energy shield boots because that'll translate directly into a ton more armor. All right, now let's talk a little bit about gear. So we're still using Sign Aquio. I think these are just best in slot gloves. I don't think you can really do better. I don't even think you can imagine better than this for this build. You know, freezing enemies at 50% instead of 100 and making them take 20% more damage while they're frozen is insane. And it's good for everything. It's good for Herald of Ice, triggering on frozen enemies, which are basically frozen all the time. It's good for bossing, obviously, to freeze them way faster. So these are pretty irreplaceable, and it's worth it to spend on an Idol of Cirrus for this. The body armor, like I mentioned, is definitely something that we've played around with a lot, going for ones that have a ton of spirit, going for ones that have more defensive value. This is kind of a perfect mix of everything. The faster energy shield recharge start is like such a good mod if you're playing an energy shield build. It really is a massive difference maker, and getting that on your body armor is great. The helm, getting crit chance on your helm is also pretty good for your damage. You know, you want as much armor and resistances and stuff, but that crit is a real big difference maker too. The belt is maybe one of the spots where we could go for like a real high-end gearing option. Like we could definitely run a headhunter here. As you can see, this has resistances on it, so it would take some reconfiguring, but it would definitely make the build faster and stronger at high end. It would also get a little annoying as soon as you start stealing Shroud Walker or whatever and teleporting all over randomly. That might get a little irritating, but it would definitely be worth it to fit in a headhunter and just figure out resistances after having done that, but we just haven't done that yet. A couple of other spots where we could throw in a lot more currency and really juice things up is dropping Deep Freeze off of Lunar Assault, even though it is really nice, and putting Rakiata's Flow there. You know, that costs like 90 divines or something, but that would be a humongous damage increase. to have that in there. And then doing the same thing with Overextend, which is like a pretty good crit damage bonus on Shred. He has about 15% more damage according to Pob, something like that, 15-16% more damage, maybe 20. Just dropping that and going with Garricon's Resolve would be an absolutely enormous damage increase, and maybe we wouldn't drop Overextend, maybe we drop Long Fuse instead. It would lose some crystal damage, but then the rest of our damage would be really insane. Yeah, so Overextend and Garricon's Resolve do have really nice synergy with each other, you know, that bifurcating crit. Obviously, this would cost you like 100 divines plus, but that would be pretty huge for maximizing our damage, so that's probably the move. I mean, you can see the damage here is like 830,000 DPS, up from 548. Like, that would be absolutely preposterous for bossing, even at the cost of Long Fuse. I think, you know, clearly worth it, but it obviously does come with a serious price tag. All right, and then just to kind of touch on a couple of other gear upgrades that we've made. Really, the last big two are the weapon, and ultimately this is one that we just went out and bought. So we played around with crafting some, and you can make decent ones for very cheap, you know, just using the same technique that we've done for the Poison Pathfinder weapon, where you just start with a weapon that has a high % increased physical damage roll on it, and then use essences to add flat fizz, essences to add fizzes extra, you know, roll up the suffixes accordingly. That all works. The issue with it is just it's hard to actually guarantee crit chance. You know, you basically just have to make a bunch of those and hope you hit crit chance. This is right here is one that we had you know, kind of made our way into making, and it has attack speed, but ultimately we had to settle for like onslaught from an essence instead of crit chance. Kind of a bummer. So buying Magi talismans that are well rolled that have like a bunch of physical damage on the prefixes is kind of tough, and damage as extra on a prefix on this, because this build already has so much damage as extra, actually isn't as good as just getting more flat damage of any kind, fire, lightning, cold, whatever. So spiny talismans are actually better for damage, and you do lose some rage. Like, instead of 80 something rage that you would get with a Magi talisman, you're down into like 69 range, which is nice. You know, you do lose out on some damage through Bater's Vengeance and Rage actually doing what Rage does, increasing your attack damage, but Spiny Talismans are just way cheaper, and they have this insanely high base crit chance of like 10% or 11%, so this is like really, really good for getting your damage up as well. And then you just still use the same, you still want to use the same runes, you know, if you are buying one, which is probably easier to do than actually crafting one. The upside of crafting is, you know, you can sell off your unlucky crafts, I suppose, but that's kind of what other people are doing too, right? So you want to use the Sacred Wall's Rune of the Sky. That's really good for damage extra of all elements. And then Farrell's Rune of the Hunt is incredibly strong. You absolutely want to use that in your weapon. And the thing is, when you are looking at weapons that are being listed, weapons that are going to show up with more DPS are not going to have these in. They're going to be the ones that have % increased fizz or flat elemental damage socketed in there. That's how they're going to show up, you know, as doing more damage. So you kind of have to double check everything in PoB before you go spending 5, 10, 15, 250 divines on a weapon. But this was not a particularly expensive weapon. Like, a weapon with these same stats that was like a Magi Talisman might have been 50 or 100 divines. I think this one was like 15. Maybe a bit of a deal, but still not that insane. You know, it's just like, what, crit attack speed and then an essence mod level of attack skills, and then just like some physical damage or elemental damage or whatever on the prefix. That's kind of that. Then as for the amulet, basically this was just kind of a lucky craft on the same model of amulet craft that we've done before, where you just start with a +3 magic item and then use essences to craft it up. You know, you add a suffix on that you like with essences, and then this was just very lucky exalts for prefixes that just gave armor and energy shield, along with that global defense modifier from Essence of Enhancement or whatever it's called. And it was like, well, this is absolutely insane. Unfortunately, the Unveil strength was not as insane, but, you know, it's fine. Maybe this is actually good enough to justify the expense of an Omen of Light. I don't know. Maybe it'll just stick as it is. It's pretty great, right? So this is definitely part of why the character has felt so tanky, but even without either of the, like, armor or increased max ES modifiers, this would still be a great necklace. And crafting these is super fun and, you know, kind of cheap to do too. Other than, of course, the base cost of buying a +3 magic amulet, but then the rest of the process is actually pretty inexpensive. So yeah, ultimately that is Werewolf Druid. This build has completely blown our expectations out of the water. 10 out of 10, cannot recommend highly enough, really. Alright, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and finally thank you to all of our channel members. If you want to support us and help us make more PoE content, consider becoming a channel member as well. Thanks for watching. Bye.